Good morning. Happy Saturday. And welcome to Elm Community Insights, weekly Saturday community meditation, Dharma talk, and discussion. My name is Aishah Shahidah Simmons, and I've been coming and a part of the Sangha since, I guess, officially since January. And now, yeah, since January, so it's August. I'm gonna hit mute because there's like a reverb. Mute all. Let's see. How do I do that? So if you're not on mute, if you could please mute. So we will begin with a guided meditation. So often we arrive before we arrive. So I want to invite everyone to please find a comfortable posture where you're either sitting, standing, or laying down or lying down, and just kind of connecting with the earth, not kind of, really connecting with the earth beneath you, either through your chair, the floor, the couch, cushion, just connecting and bringing all of you to this very moment. You may want to close your eyes or lower your gaze, tuning or inclining your intention to one of the six doors, six sense doors: the eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, the body, or the mind. These are all of the doors that we, in split seconds, process what's happening. So just being aware of the six sense doors, but tuning inward. There isn't anywhere to get to. We are here in this moment to moment to moment. I invite you to release judging mind and comparing mind and fixing mind. At least for these next 90 minutes or for however long you're able to be with us. Each of those mind states can present a hindrance from us really just being in the present moment. And remember that we are practicing practice. We are not practicing for results. So we're going to connect to our breath, the in breath and out breath. If you are able, and if it's not too subtle, I invite you to focus on the sensations below the nostrils and above the upper lip. You may be aware that the air on the inhale is cooler than the air on the exhale. And if that's too subtle at this moment for you to hone in on, and I invite you to connect with the breath through the chest or your abdomen, rising and falling. And as thoughts arise, as they always will, allow them to just kind of come and go, similar to the inhaling and exhaling, not allowing yourself to get caught up in the story. And if you do, without judging or fixing, just be aware and come back to the breath. It is the habit pattern of the mind to think and to get caught up in the thoughts. And through our practice of connecting with the breath, we can just come out of that and come back to the breath. And as you stay connected to your breath, allowing thoughts to come and go, are you aware of the sounds that you may be hearing, but yet not necessarily tuning into? It may be the sound of my breath, not my breath, the sound of my voice, excuse me. It may be the sounds of where you're located. Refrigerator humming, or people in the library, cars passing by. Or when I'm not speaking, it may be complete silence, which is the absence of sound. Being aware of the sound is one way to practice wise attention. If you are a member of the hearing world, we're hearing sounds all of the time, but we are often not tuning in unless it's directed towards us. So the wise attention of being aware of sounds that are not necessarily directed toward you. Are you aware of the felt sense of your body sitting on the floor or in a chair or cushion or lying on the floor? What sensations are you aware of in different parts of the body? Is it the sensation of sound in your ears? Is it the sensation of the breath? Is it the sensation of your body in whatever posture you may be in? What are you attuned to in this moment? Are you experientially aware of anicca or impermanence, the English translation of the Pali word anicca? A constant changing from moment to moment. Each breath is different, each sound is different. The sensations, regardless of how gross or subtle they may be, are changing from moment to moment. Are you able to tune in to these changes, subtle or not so subtle? I want to invite everyone staying connected to your breath and being aware of your sensations that you're feeling in your body through any of the 6 sense doors. I invite you to participate in a chant. I'm going to do the English version of the chant. I will share the Pali translation during my talk. It's an impermanence chant that I've heard for many years, but actually learned it last year in July 22 at an summer insight retreat at Spirit Rock with Darrell Williams, Kamala Masters, Nekwe Cubieros, Joseph Goldstein, and Walt O.P. And so this version is from, or the what do you call it? The arrangement is from a Dharma teacher named Rachel Lewis. And so the words of the chant are, all things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. And impermanence is perhaps one of the most important teachings. There's so many important teachings in the Dhamma. But when we really can embody an understanding of impermanence, it is or can be a direct pathway to liberation, because things are constantly changing. So I will start. I mean, I know in the library you all will hear each other. In Zoom, we won't hear each other. Feel free to join in and activate your vagus nerve. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be one with this truth brings great happiness. Perhaps it is time to sit less and meditate more. Mindfulness is easy on the cushion, difficult on the street, but it is here in the life, in the body, in the to and fro, that we more clearly see our impurity, our delusion, our greed, and our hatred. And it is here we most need to watch, to see, to be aware, to sit with it all, to be with it, to be. We need to sit when we move. Meditation is not an escape. It is but the silent observation of reality. And this can be done. It must be done with every breath we make, with every step we take. Thank you, everyone, for your practice. The poem was by Ian McCrory, and the book, The Moon Appears When the Water is Still, Reflections of the Dhamma. So for the next 8 minutes, I know that there are different time zones, so until 20 minutes after the hour, I invite you to either take a stretch break, a hydration break, or you may want to do some mindful movement or journaling. And we'll come back at 20 minutes after the hour for my talk on Kisa Gotami's story and how it reminds us that we're not the only ones. Thank you.
So we changed the sound again in the room. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Is that
okay? We changed the sound again in the room. I just wanted you to know and just to double check, but it sounds better now.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thanks for letting me know. All right. So first, I just want to, before I begin my talk, or maybe it's part of the talk, just in thinking about suffering and impermanence, just acknowledging just all of the suffering that's happening everywhere in many of our daily lives at some point or another, or the country, the United States that we're in, and the just countries all over the world. My heart is so heavy um, just around what's happening in Maui, just recognizing that we, our shared home, our only true home, and in some ways, well, maybe our bodies are our only true home in this way, but just in terms of Earth, it's just really in peril, and we're constantly reminded that none of us are safe from becoming climate refugees. So just holding not only those in Maui, but everyone who's been impacted by climate change, everyone who's just been impacted by just any unforeseen nightmare that results in suffering. And so, as I shared before the break, I'm going to talk about Kisa Gotami, who is one of several famous stories in the Pali canon, and how the story reminds us that her story reminds us that we're not the only one. I've been thinking a lot about her story for, I would say, the past 6 months. And it's very surreal because I've been hearing her story for about, over 20 years, and definitely for 17 years when I sat in a different lineage. It was just definitely a part of the discourses all of the time. And so even though I heard the story and I had this intellectual understanding, yes, impermanence, yes, everyone dies, it didn't like take root. Like, so the seeds were there, but it didn't take root until earlier this year, which I'll share. But for people who don't know her story, and we're talking about the time of the Buddha. So we're talking about, over 2,600 years ago in the town of, in India. So Kisa Gotami was alive during the time of the Buddha, and she was very thin. And so the whole name Kisa Gotami means, skinny Gotami. She was teased. She came from a lower income or caste. I'm not sure if she was Dalit. I would not be surprised. And so she just had a very hard life. She married a man whose family didn't approve of her because of her status and her physical appearance. They were very unkind towards her, and her husband essentially didn't really have her back in that he cared for her, as the story goes, but he was very loyal to his family. So he was torn between loyalty to the family clan and to caring for his wife. And this resulted in her being treated poorly all around. So she had a very hard life. But everything shifted for her when she gave birth to a baby boy. And patriarchy. I'm sorry, I have to bring that in. So that meant, in terms of that, the name, the family name would continue, that there would be an heir to the clan. So her status changed. She became the celebrated mother of the son of the heir of the clan of her husband's family. She went from being despised to favored. And so shortly thereafter, that illusion rapidly dissipated because her son died. And so I'm not a parent, but I can definitely imagine just the insurmountable grief that any mother may have when their child dies. And so she just could not hold on to what had to be just an unbearable tragedy of her child dying. I can't even imagine the grief she must have had. And then this was compounded by the complex reality that her son's existence was the guarantee for her stature in peace in her husband's family. So she was terrified that somehow she would be blamed for her son's death, that her husband's clan would torment her and resume despising her as they had before her pregnancy and birth. She feared that her husband would reject her. So that just sent her into a downward spiral. And we're talking again 2,600 years ago, when banishment by your husband, family, could mean a metaphysical, if not even literal, death from an inability to survive. And that is still a reality for so many in not only this country, but the world. And so she, overwhelmed with grief and sorrow, she lost the balance of her mind and refused to believe that her son was dead. She really just convinced herself that he was sleeping and that he just needed some medicine that would help him wake up. So she took the little corpse around from house to house to house, asking medicine for her cure, to cure her child. And people in the community were unkind. They laughed at her and were saying, "Why are you asking for medicine? Can't you see that this baby is dead? Take the baby to the funeral grounds, the charnel." And so this was without an ounce of compassion or care. People were calling her crazy. And she was just really, the grief consumed her. She was delusional. And fortunately, one of her neighbors who was kind and caring and did not just, throw her to the wind and cared for her. And I think about that. I think about this as taking a detour from the story around just, mental illness, and just so many people who are suffering with mental illness, and how do we treat them when we are aware that they're saying things that are not based on the reality that we're living, right? Not even considering that that is their reality. Do we discard them? Do we make fun of them? Do we have empathy? Do we offer compassion? And so he knew that her behavior was strange, and he kind of assumed that it was because of the depth of her sorrow. And he said, "Why don't you go to the Buddha, the enlightened one, and perhaps he can give you the medicine that you need." And so she was fortunate that she lived in the town of where the Buddha was giving a discourse. And she, in the middle of of him delivering a discourse, she came in really just without any balance of her mind, and was just like, "You have to wait, help me save my son." And Buddha, recognizing that the child was dead, but that she was not able to hear that, said that he could help her. And so she was so excited. And she was like, "I'll do whatever you need me to do." And he said, "I'm going to need you to get mustard seeds." And she was like, "Oh, okay." He said, get mustard seeds from someone in the community. And she said, all right. And he said, "Wait, that's not the whole assignment." He said, "I need you to find mustard seeds from a home where no one has died, or where no one has experienced death in their family or community." And so she was so excited. She was like, "Great, I'm going to get these mustard seeds. I'm going to, and then the Buddha is going to, save my son." And so she started traveling on foot, still carrying her child, and knocking on the door, saying, "I've talked with the Buddha. I've talked with the enlightened one. And do you have mustard seeds? He's going to cure my child." And so people were like, "Oh, yes, I'm very happy to help you. Yes, I have mustard seeds." And she said, oh, well, has anyone died in your family? I can only accept the mustard seeds from a house where no one has died. And so the first house was like, "Oh, yes, someone died, and my husband died, my daughter died, my sister died." And death was very common. Disease was rampant and illness was rampant, and the technologies that we have today were not available. 2,600 years ago. So death was just numerous. And so she went to another house, and on and on and on, and just kept hearing these stories of people who lost loved ones, and they would be consumed with grief and crying. And she found herself comforting them, cultivating compassion for them in their sorrow. And it was this act of going from house to house to house to house that she began to regain the balance of her mind and recognize that there is no house, no place where someone has not been impacted by death, either directly or indirectly. And so she realized that she was not the only one, but this was the common human fate. And this was an experiential understanding that no words would have been able to convey to her in her experience. It was the experience of hearing the different stories from home to home. She understood the law of existence, that to be born is really meaning that you will die in this life. And so in this way, the Buddha was able to heal her obsession and bring her to the acceptance of reality. And so she no longer refused to believe that her baby was dead, but understood that death was the destiny of all beings. And so that was the way in which the Buddha could heal grief-stricken people. And with Kisa Gotami, she buried her child, and really came to her senses, and became an arhat, which means that it becomes a stream enterer, a winner, in Theravada in Buddhism, that she was on the path to enlightenment, and she actually became fully enlightenment, and she was admitted into the order of nuns. And there are songs and chants around not only Kisa Gotami, but all of the first order of nuns. And I will share a link to a book called The First Buddhist Women at the Time of the Buddha. There's a book of poems, but this is actually stories. And so for me, the story of Kisa Gotami clearly is about impermanence, right? It's about that death is imminent, and we don't know when it's coming, that it's always walking with us. It is our companion, and we can't avoid it. And also, but beyond death, also impermanence, that things are constantly changing, constantly. The rug is always being pulled from under our foot because of attachment and expectation. And so for me, why I really love this story and how it really resonates is because it touches on so many of the teachings, key core teachings in Buddhism. So the first one is definitely impermanence, Anicca. It's also, the second one is on the 8 worldly winds, and that is that of gain and loss, status and disgrace, censure and praise, pleasure and pain, that we're always doing the dance with these winds, that we can't have one without the other. And then also equanimity, because when we are aware of impermanence, the negative aspects are now as what we perceive to be negative, those because of attachment. I shouldn't call it negative. When we are aware of things happening that we don't want to happen, that it can cause us to lose the balance of our mind. And it is equanimity that is that steady anchor that keeps us going, keeps us steady. And so on a personal note, how Kisa Gotami's story just resonates with me is that I've really been doing a lot of dancing with despair this year, having lost a very, very, very dear friend of 28 years to cancer. And as an independent artist and culture worker, having had at least 3 instances where I applied for things and really not only wanted them, but thought I was going to get them and didn't get them. And how that sent me into a tailspin, right? Initially, of just because I mean, it was almost, I think about Kisa Gotami, and in 2 instances, I convinced myself, well, 1 instance specifically, I really convinced myself I was going to get it. I mean, to the point where I was like, I was telling my partner, oh, well, when this happens, I'm going to get it. And it's, things will change in terms of finances and all of that. It's just such a surreal experience. I don't even know why, because I've been an artist since 98, for 26 years. So I never do that. I want things, when I apply for fellowships or I want them. So don't get me wrong, but I don't imagine having them. This was 1 instance when I did. I don't even know what was going on. So that when I received the information that I didn't get it, it was the second arrow, if you will, right? So there was the arrow of not getting it. So that was painful. But then it was the second arrow of like, oh no, and just wallowing in despair. And definitely it was a why me moment, right? Why is this happening to me? And I'm very kind of just that I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one going through, how am I going to make a living? I'm the only one going through this. And so again, thinking about Kisa Gotami's story, right? That she's the only one with her dead son. She's the only one who's dealing with this. And then having conversations with others and having the awareness. And similarly having conversations, hearing the stories of, so many. I'm in community of, it's not even about being an artist. It's just about whatever it is in terms of those things that we need or want and don't have them, right? And this week I had the opportunity. I was one session was already pre-planned, and then there was an impromptu with 2 of my teachers, Dara Williams and Tereri Sala, and in one conversation with Dara, because I really was in a moment of like, how am I going to survive? I was just very distraught. And I said, I just need to understand why am I here? How did I get here? And and Dara kept saying, that doesn't matter. And I was just like, yes, it does matter. I need to know. Like, I was in that moment of just like, I have to understand. She said, how is that going to help you? And then I was initially very defensive. I was just like, well, it's like, if I'm sick, if I have diarrhea, I need to understand, what did I eat? What caused, the diarrhea, or what caused this? Like, I was just like, I did not want to hear that didn't matter. And it took a while, not a long time in the hour that we talked, but it was just kind of like, I just kept trying to figure out, why was I in this position? How did I get here? And she just kept saying, that's not the question. The question is, and this is a recurring question that she shares with me, given the external conditions, what are you going to do about it? And that's not a question I like, because it is a question that invites me to take agency, right? And she was just like, there are so many causes and conditions that brought you to this moment. And focusing on why or how you got here isn't necessarily going to help you for this moment or the next moment. And I sat with it, like in our conversation. And it was just like, it was an aha moment. And I knew that I was giving this talk, and I was just like, I have to maybe I'll think of different titles or different subjects to talk about, because I feel like every time I plan to give the title of a talk, it's like, boom, that experiential learning to help with the teaching, right? And there's nothing like experiential learning. And I'm not, it's not like I'm over the moon happy that I'm, really at a serious crossroads in my life, but I am grateful for the teachings around impermanence, for the teachings of the 8 worldly winds, for the teachings of equanimity, for the opportunity to really put this practice into practice, that it is not theoretical, that it is not an intellectual exercise, that this is really about putting the rubber to the road, because it is not until we are faced with unexpected challenges that may seem insurmountable that we have the real opportunity to practice with impermanence, to practice with attachment, to practice with delusion, craving. And so I invite us to really reflect on Kisa Gotami's story and the lessons that it has to teach us, and that when we are in the fire, and it will happen at some point or another on our journeys called life, that we not feel like we're the only ones, that we remember that suffering is universal. That doesn't necessarily take away from the moment of suffering, but there is some, not comfort, everybody's suffering, but that this is part of the human condition. And when you're able, if you're able to allow yourself to be with all of the emotions that arise, so that you don't bypass the feelings, that you acknowledge them, that you look at it, you're like, oh, despair has arisen, fear, anger, they've arisen. And what does it feel like in our bodies, right? So not just the story of like, oh, this didn't happen or this person did this to me, but what is anger feeling like in this moment? What is despair feeling like, right? And then when it feels so overwhelming, and it usually does, can you go out in nature? And it doesn't, I mean, a park is great, but even nature, just outdoors, to allow the weight of what you're holding, to share it with the earth, to let the earth hold it with you, so that you can connect and know that you are not alone in this, right? So that sometimes sitting, which is very powerful, and I do it as often as I can, may not be all that can work in those moments, because it may be so intense, right? That you may have to move. So you may want to do walking meditation, right? You may just want to just sit and be aware of your breath and the sensations out in nature, if you can get to a park, any kind of park, any kind of, to feel the earth holding you, to be grateful for the trees that are providing the oxygen, support the carbon dioxide that's giving us the oxygen that we need, right? In experiential BIPOC retreat that I and Joy and Carletta, who's on Zoom, and I attended, one of the teachers, Jeannie Corrigal, was a really powerful retreat with Dara Williams and Yang O and Josen, Tamari Gibson and Lian Chi. And Jeannie Corrigal, who is Métis teacher, Dharma teacher from Canada. She gave an acronym in one of my teacher interviews, and I think that she also shared within the Sangha at the retreat, of muck, when things are happening. And it's one that ever since I've heard it in June, that I hold on to dearly and just so grateful. And it's when the rug is pulled from under our feet, when the stuff hits the fan, that the acronym of muck. And so can we use mindfulness? Can we be mindful of, ooh, this is hard. This feels unfair, but just be with it, right? Without judgment, just giving all, just being with it. So that's the M for muck. And then the U is for the universality of it, right? That while what may be happening in that moment may be unique to our to you in this moment, right? I didn't get the fellowship, I didn't get the job, so it's that but I'm not the only person who didn't get a fellowship, who didn't get the job, right? I'm not the only person who didn't lose a best friend to illness. And so just holding that so that you don't spiral into this is only me, this is all about me, that we recognize that suffering is all around us, and that we can also tap into the compassion for ourselves and for others, right? Which brings us to the causes and conditions, right? When I said I was sharing with Dara, I got to understand why this is happening, right? And understanding that there are so many causes and conditions from, if you believe in multiple lifetimes, perhaps from previous lifetimes, but definitely in this lifetime, that bring us to this moment. So many causes and conditions that are beyond our control, right? Thinking about the people in Maui, thinking about the people in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Palestine, in Yemen. There's so many causes and conditions that are happening. And so, and it's what can we do in this moment, right? So rather than like, why me, or why is this happening? What can we do given the external conditions? What can we do to direct the next moment? And then K, can we be kind to ourselves? So often we can be so harsh to ourselves. And then that harshness to ourselves extends to others, right? We don't just keep the harshness to ourselves. And so those are the acronyms for muck. And I think that they're just so applicable to the reality of impermanence, the reality of the 8 worldly winds of gain and loss, status and disgrace, censure and praise, pleasure and pain, and equanimity as that anchor, right? That keeps us steady. The anchor. And that's where pausing and being with the emotions, not bypassing, allows us to find that stability. You know? And so during our meditation, I shared the English, loose English translation of the Pali chant, Anicca. And I just want to share it in Pali, which is the language, the original language of the Buddha. And it's Anicca vata sankhara. Anicca vata sankhara. Upada vaya dhammino. Uppajjitva Nirujihanti Tesam vupasamo sukho. Anicca vata sankhara. Upada vaya dhammino. Uppajjitva Nirujihanti Tesam vupasamo sukho. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To be in harmony with this truth brings great happiness. Thank you for your kind listening. I will pause the recording and open it up for discussion before we close. All right, well, let's thank you all for your sharings, reflections, and let's close with dedication of the merits. When we practice, when we come together to practice the Dharma, we're not just practicing for ourselves, but we are practicing for the benefit of all beings everywhere and without exception. All human beings, all animal beings, all insect beings, unseen beings, big and small, near and far. And remembering that we are one of those beings, nature, all beings. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings be free from greed, delusion, and hatred. And may all beings know joy, love, wonder, and liberating wisdom in this life, just as it is. Thank you, everyone, for your presence, for your practice, for your sharing. Thank you. And I'll defer to Tracy and Joy if there are any announcements.